Welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Bible Study. In this series of Bible studies, we'll be taking a closer look at the Bible's evidence for the completion of the prolonged Judgment Day and the end of the world occurring in the year 2033. And now here's your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann.
Hello and welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Bible Study that is taking a look at the biblical evidence for the end of the world in the year 2033. And this is study number 33. We've been sharing these studies around social media. E-Bible Fellowship is on practically all the various platforms. And we have been getting comments from people, typically atheists or secularists, who mock the idea of biblical evidence as though it is something absurd, something that is, of course, not to be taken into consideration at all from their perspective, and yet we have to consider their perspective in order to see whether we are to take seriously their mockery or not. Is there such a thing as biblical evidence, or is it foolishness, not even to be contemplated or really seriously looked into? Of course, the answer is that there is most definitely a thing such as biblical evidence. Biblical evidence is what the Bible would have to say and teach about a matter. It is proven by the Bible itself. It is a truth confirmed by the Bible. We turn to the Bible. We look for pertinent information regarding the thing we are interested in this case, the end of the world, timeline for the end of the world, a particular year, 2033 is in view, and I've been addressing that there's a biblical calendar of history, and that God, through that biblical calendar, has operated in time past, in Old Testament history, in a very precise manner, that things do not happen randomly, but they happen with precision, with exactness. 6,023 years, creation to the flood, from the flood in 4990 BC to the cross when Jesus died and later resurrected in 33 AD, 5,023 calendar years. From the flood to the year 2033, 7,023 calendar years. You see the pattern? The pattern no man could manipulate and cause to happen. We're using key biblical events found in the Bible and the genealogies, the lifespans of individuals in Genesis 5 and elsewhere that give us those dates for creation, 11,013 BC, for the flood, 4990 BC, and even for the cross in 33 AD. These dates come forth from the Bible, and the fullness of the number in thousands of years, 6,023, 5,023, from, again, the flood to 2033, 7,023, or if you go from creation to May 21, 2011, 13,023. Why such consistency? Why such consistency? If it's out of man's mind, it would be sporadic or erratic, and you would not see consistency. You would see just any old kind of a date. But we're seeing precision. Precision indicates a mind behind it. It's a design, a time design that reveals a mind is in view. But again, since it's coming from the Bible, it's not that, these critics, these people of the world who are critical of the Bible, their criticism mainly, and first of all, is with the Bible itself, is with the existence of God, the God of the Bible. And that is the point, that begins their mockery, the whole idea of a spirit being who is God, the whole idea of a spiritual realm of existence that is heaven, the whole idea that this spirit being moved in this world that is physical, very material, and caused holy men of old to write down things and to record his word, and it's a holy word from a divine being who is the creator of all. That's why they mock and criticize and do not even consider the possibility of biblical evidence. Of course, we're an individual's spiritual condition is what will finally come into play concerning whether they receive the things of God, any truth of the Bible or not. So we're not thinking we can change anyone's spiritual condition. A mocker will, in all likelihood, remain a mocker, because, though, not due to the fact that their position is the right position, the correct position. No, they will remain a mocker because of what we read in Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews 11, verse 1 says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." Things not seen. Well, that's referring to invisible things. And art, yet it uses the word things. The idea of the world basically is, if it's not seen, it doesn't exist, except they realize there is tiny microbes and that are invisible to the naked eye. That's a different thing. That's still matter, very minuscule bits of creation that you need microscope to see. Their idea of not seeing things, it takes effect when it's spiritual things, when it's God primarily. He is invisible. He's invisible because he's a spirit being. And spirit beings, you cannot see. Angels, for instance, are spirit creatures that are invisible. If we go to Colossians 1, we read in Colossians chapter 1, it says, I'll get there, Colossians 1 in verse 15, speaking of Christ, who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature. For by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible. Whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him. God, the Lord Jesus Christ, who is God, created visible things. You see the room, you see me, of course, everything we can see. in the world using any means such as a microscope are visible things, or a telescope looking into space, part of the visible creation, physical, material creation that God created in 6 days. He could have done it with a single snap of the finger, to use an expression, yet he purposefully took 6 days to work out his purposes for the number 6, for one thing, but everything in the world is visible. This is what the natural-minded man accepts and receives. This is where science, the only area for science, is in the physical realm of existence. Science will analyze physical things. They can study physical things. And that means science, when it comes to God, who's a spirit being, well, how are they going to analyze that? The only way is to analyze the physical creation, and some scientists have done this, and some scientists, few out of the whole, which would be expected, the whole of the realm of science in the world, few have their faith strengthened or verified. They learn it first in the Bible, then they see design in the physical world, in the creation all around them, and the idea of big bangs for origin and evolution thereafter, producing such well-designed things, creatures, living, thinking creatures like man, or living creatures like dogs and cats and birds and cows. It is astronomically an impossibility. That is, in order for one thing to fall perfectly into place, and for there to be one living creature, and not only the creature himself, but for the environment to be perfect to give provide or support life for that creature, is, we must say, an actual impossibility if you look at the math. And it is an absurdity, it is ridiculous, it is foolishness. And so for secularists, atheists, natural-minded people, grounded in the things of the physical realm of creation, to mock the idea of spiritual things, of biblical evidence, because it comes from a spirit being, God, who wrote this holy book, the Bible. Well, first of all, take a look at the things you believe. Take a look at the things you believe, which are out of the realm of possibility. When something is trillions of times likely to happen, that's out of the realm of possibility for just one creature. But to have all the creatures, all the beauty, all the design of the butterfly, the spots upon the leopard, the nose of creatures in the proper place, the ears placed exactly where they need to be, and every other bit of design. It is all designed, and it's all been a testimony. Everything goes thing. Atheists, I enjoy discussions with them, been doing it for quite some time. Atheists, they say, show me the evidence for God. Show me the proof that God exists. Go ahead, I'm waiting. And I say to them sometimes, well, the proof is literally everything you have ever experienced in all your life. From looking into the mirror, or to when you look down at your hand, or when you look up at the night sky, when the sun shines in the morning, and when you see the moon in whatever stage at night, and when you see the trees and the grass and the animals and the deer running in the open field, these are all testimonies of a designer, a maker, a creator. Someone had to make it. That is the absolute truth. That is a fact beyond any doubt of reason. It is illogical. It is unreasonable. And it's only out of tremendous desperation. It's only out of incredible degree of desperation that brilliant men of the world, brilliant scientists, who are many of them atheists, they are not they are not children of God from every appearance. They apparently disdain the Bible, but they're brilliant men as far as men go. You know, we have to really, I think, offer that up because when we say someone's brilliant, oh, what a genius, and other men look up and they marvel, 150 IQ, wow, how great. But it's a tiny little mind, a tiny little peanut-sized mind, not even a peanut, in comparison to the brilliant mind of God, the infinite mind of an almighty creator who has ever been and will ever be, who inhabits the whole spectrum of eternity and existence and knows all from the beginning that has no beginning to the end that has no end. He knows all information. Now compare you please feel free, gather all the brilliant scientists, and even if it were every human being with a brilliant mind, and you gathered them all, billions together, then it would probably measure the size of a peanut in relationship to the infinite mind of the God that they mock, the God they ridicule, the God they think they're more intelligent than. They think they're above the Bible. They think they can criticize his holy book. And no. Well, of course they do, but they don't do so honestly. They don't do so in any kind of genuine way whatsoever. It's just the rebel mocking the judge who is judging him. And that's the problem. There's a bias. There's a bias in men towards the idea of an existence of a God who's a righteous God, a law-giving God, and who holds man accountable to that law, and who has found fault in man and condemned him for breaking the law. So you see, there's a definite personal stake that's deep down in the sinner, whether the sinner be a brilliant scientist or a homeless person on the street with maybe a much lower IQ, doesn't matter. Same built-in bias that they do not want there to be a God. If they come to the conclusion there is a God, then, well, and we're made in his image and likeness, which of course would be the explanation for why man is so different than all other creatures. Evolutionary explanations do not explain. And why we have a sense of right and wrong, of guiltiness when we do wrong, because we're made in the image and likeness of God. He's written his law upon our heart, and we have an inborn understanding or ingrained sense of that law deep down within us. And so we see, and we've seen over these years, you know, this is Judgment Day. This is Judgment Day. This is the time God is judging the world and its institutions. One of the institutions God is judging is the scientific community, because God's a jealous God. And God has told us where everything began. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. One verse explains everything, there must be an initial being. There must be an initial mind, and God is it. There must be an initial mover who starts everything, who gets everything going. And it's either God or eternal matter. And that's what evolutionists really are saying started everything, but they can't start with nothing. So they start with some kind of little thing that exploded, matter, some type of substance that is rather vague as far as their explanation. It exploded and the universe comes into being. Where did it come from? No explanation. But they say, we're working on that. We're working on that. No, they just don't want to admit. Some are starting to, a very few, but most do not want to admit that their theory depends on eternal matter. There must always have been something physical, something material. Remember that's their whole basis for understanding this world. It's only the physical world. It's only the material world. We reject out of hand anything spiritual, anything that you cannot examine with your physical senses. And yet that's the most ridiculous theory imaginable. That I mean, if you believe in eternal matter, you think that is more scientific, or that is more wise to believe something like that than an eternal God with a brilliant mind who possesses the power to create? Well, of course, they realize the many problems with admitting that it must have been eternal matter in the beginning, and so they just wave it off, and yet they have evolution is built upon origin. Without origin, how do you get to evolution? And basically they've built their house. This is how it is. This is the truth. We know everything that happened billions and billions of years ago. Just look at the wisdom of man in the world, and we see the limitations of man's wisdom on a daily basis. Man is not that smart. He's not that intelligent to have accuracy when it comes to things billions and billions of years ago. And of course, the Bible won't even begin to allow that, because the Bible tells us creation was a little over 13,000 years ago. Well, anyway, the bias in man, he can't have a God, because if there's a God, he'll be found guilty. He'll be subject to the penalty. He doesn't like being in that position. Therefore, to ward it off, to get away from it, to avoid discussion of it, there is no God. What foolishness! Biblical evidence, and yet there is a God. There is a God, and this is his word, and he writes from an eternal perspective. And so the evidence now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Evidence of things not seen. And we're looking at something not seen, the end of the world. The end of the world. Moses also, by faith, we're told, well, I'll just read it in Hebrews 11, in verse 24. By faith, Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. Invisible. Moses saw him, God's elect people down through the centuries and right today, see God. No, not in images or dreams. There's none of that kind of foolery. We see him with eyes of faith, eyes of understanding. When God reveals himself as an almighty everlasting God, we believe it, we understand it to be true. Therefore, we see him. We see him when he lays out timelines in his word. We know the Bible's absolute truth. We believe them. We trust them. We trust that, yes, indeed, it is, for example, 2,000 years from 33 AD to 2033 AD. We trust that is when Christ died on the cross and resurrected. And we also say, oh, this must be God, because so many other points of biblical interest are pointing to that year. And look at that, 2,000 years exactly to that date. And you see it all starts coming together for the true elect child of God. And I'm sorry if anyone thinks biblical evidence is nonsensical. Unfortunately, the problem lies with you in your heart, and there's nothing that can be done about that. Well, got a little bit off track, but Lord willing, when we get together in our next study, we're going to get back to the wall. Back to the wall. We looked at the wall of Jericho falling down, the wall pointing to salvation. And now we want to look at some other scripture that speaks of walls that fall. Walls that fall, and we'll, again, according to God's perfect will, discuss that when we get together next time.
Thank you for joining us for eBible Fellowship's Evening Bible Studies with your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann. For more studies and information, visit our website at www.ebiblefellowship.org. Until our next Bible study, may the Lord's perfect will be done.